Hello, this is Claus Jensen presenting video number 4 in my series on Capablanca, and this game is one of the most famous Capablanca games of all time. It was played in Manhattan Chess Club in 1918, and his opponent as black was Frank James Marshall, the US champion for many years, and also World Chess Championship contender in 1907, where he lost a match to Lasker. Marshall had already played Capablanca several times coming into this game. 9 years earlier they had played a match which Capablanca had won convincingly, and many of Capa's wins in that match came from the white side of the Ruy Lopez. So Marshall hadn't played the Ruy Lopez for several years in tournaments. Instead he had been preparing a whole new system which was to be tested at the right time and right place. And this was now. So let's see what happened when Capablanca, completely unprepared, meets the Marshall attack for the first time in chess history. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, and castles, c3 and d5. And nowadays this move would come as no surprise to anyone, but at the time of this game we shall remember that the Marshall attack had never been seen in a master game. And Capablanca could of course reject the gambit, but he was up to the challenge to see what Marshall had prepared. So he took the pawn, e takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and in the game Marshall played knight f6, and today it's generally accepted that c6 is the best move, primarily because it saves a move, and in many lies the knight is actually more offensive on f4, and it doesn't block the queen from going to h4. So there are several reasons for c6 being better than knight f6. But okay, knight f6 was played. Capablanca put his rook back to safety on e1, bishop d6, and Capablanca here plays h3 to take away the g4 square for the light pieces of Marshall. But Marshall is really fired up in this game, and he shows great determination to get an attack going and to prove that his Marshall attack is an idea that will last. So he plays knight g4 here. And the idea here is that h takes g4, queen h4. And if now, for example, queen f3, then bishop h2 check, king f1, bishop takes g4 with a very strong attack for Marshall. And if instead of queen f3, for example f3, then bishop g3, rook e4, c5 with good initiative and very difficult for Capablanca to develop properly. I'm thinking of his pieces on the queen side. So this was the idea behind knight g4, but Capablanca played the right move. He played queen f3, then followed queen h4, and again taking the knight would lead to trouble. Bishop h2 check, king f1, bishop takes g4. So again Capablanca rejects the knight and played d4 instead, which of course seeks to open up for the bishop and also make some space for the king perhaps at some point. Knight takes f2. Marshall simply continues his vicious attacks, and once again Capablanca doesn't take the knight. He could have played queen takes f2 here, but then after queen h2, bishop h2 check, king f1, bishop g3, queen d2, then I think bishop takes h3 here, g takes and queen takes, queen g2, and we would get an endgame which is unclear, fairly even, I would say. But Capablanca didn't take on f2, he played rook e2. And up until now, Marshall has sacked his knight twice, and both times Capablanca has rejected to take it. So now Marshall sacks his bishop in order to open up the h file for his queen. Bishop g4. Extremely aggressive play from Marshall, and not easy to defend for Capablanca, who had never seen any of this before. But he continues to make all the right decisions. Here it would be wrong to take on f2, because then bishop g3, queen f1, bishop takes e2, queen takes, and rook a to e8 with a huge attack for Marshall. So he did the right thing. He took the bishop on g4, h takes g4. Then followed bishop h2 check, king f1, and bishop g3. And now the steam is running a little out of Marshall's attack, and finally Capablanca sees a chance to get rid of one of Marshall's attacking pieces without jeopardizing his king. So rook takes f2 now. Queen h1 check followed, king e2, bishop takes f2, and once again Capablanca chooses the right move. He plays bishop d2, because queen takes f2, that would simply lose because of queen takes c1 and then threatening queen b2. And king takes f2, queen takes c1, queen e2, rook a to e8, queen d2, queen h1 would lead to an unclear position. So bishop d2, as played in the game, is the best move. Bishop h4 and queen h3. Capablanca has now completely taken the sting out of Marshall's attack. Rook a to e8 check, king d3, queen f1 check, king c2, bishop f2, queen f3, and queen g1. And with no attack left for Marshall, Capablanca now turns his attention to bringing out his pieces and pawns on the queen side. So bishop d5 follows here, unblocking the b pawn. c5, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, b4, bishop d6. And now he plays a maneuver that is very known for white against the Marshall, a4, opening up for the a rook. It's almost impossible to develop the a1 rook on the first rank, so it's almost always coming out in the a file. a5, a takes b5, a takes b4, rook a6, b takes c3, knight takes c3. So Capablanca has now activated all his pieces, and with two light pieces for a rook and a passed pawn on b5, this is a clearly winning position for Capablanca. Bishop b4 followed, b6, the passed pawn starts marching right away, bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, h6, b7, and with rook e3, Marshall in effect resigns the game, because now he allows Capablanca to finish the game with a very nice move, which is bishop takes f7 check. The rook on f8 is overworked. It cannot defend both f7 and b8, and there's a mate in a few moves in all lines, and the most beautiful probably being king h8 and rook takes h6 checkmate. So Marshall resigned the game after bishop takes f7 check, and I think this game was a wholehearted fight from Marshall, and of course a brilliant defensive effort from Capablanca. I think this was great stuff all the way through, and I hope you enjoyed this very famous game where Marshall introduces his martial attack to the world, and where Capablanca managed to make all the right decision over the board. And I hope to see you on my blog at clausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.